In a landmark decision that has sent shockwaves through the political and business communities, the Supreme Court has struck down the Trump administration's sweeping tariffs, ruling that the president overstepped his authority by imposing these tariffs without the explicit approval of Congress, which holds the constitutional power to regulate trade and taxation. The 6-3 decision invalidates tariffs that have shaped global supply chains, disrupted international commerce, and impacted American businesses and consumers for years, reaffirming Congress's primary and exclusive role in setting trade policy and determining tax measures, a responsibility that dates back to the nation's founding. Chief Justice Roberts wrote that while the president does have certain emergency powers, those powers do not extend to unilaterally creating a new tax system on imports, which would bypass the checks and balances established by the Constitution. The ruling is a major check on executive power, opening the door for thousands of businesses to seek refunds on tariffs paid, though the process for obtaining these refunds is expected to be lengthy and complex, involving legal and bureaucratic hurdles. Business groups and trade associations celebrated the decision as a significant win for economic stability and predictability, arguing that it will help restore confidence in the rule of law and the proper functioning of government. Meanwhile, supporters of the tariffs criticized the ruling, arguing that it weakens the president's ability to respond quickly to unfair foreign competition and protect American industries from harm. The decision sets a powerful precedent for future presidents, clarifying the boundaries between executive and legislative authority in economic policy, and ensuring that major trade decisions require broad political consensus. The fallout from this historic ruling will continue to shape U.S. trade, the balance of presidential power, and the relationship between the branches of government for years to come, with global markets and American workers watching closely. In 2018, the Trump administration launched a bold and controversial trade strategy by imposing sweeping tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of imports, with a particular focus on goods coming from China. These tariffs were enacted using emergency powers granted under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, and the Trade Expansion Act, laws originally designed for extraordinary circumstances. Supporters of the tariffs argued that this aggressive approach was necessary to protect American jobs and industries from what they saw as decades of unfair trade practices by foreign competitors. They believed that only strong action could restore balance and revive struggling sectors of the U.S. economy. Many felt that previous administrations had been too passive in the face of mounting trade deficits and factory closures, and that the tariffs represented a long overdue correction to U.S. trade policy. However, opponents, including a broad coalition of businesses, economists, and trade experts, countered that the tariffs functioned as a hidden tax on American consumers and companies, driving up prices and causing widespread disruption to supply chains across the country. Farmers and manufacturers in particular were hit hard by retaliatory tariffs from China and other trading partners, which further deepened the economic pain in rural and industrial communities. The sweeping nature of the tariffs sparked immediate legal challenges. Thousands of lawsuits were filed, with plaintiffs arguing that the administration had overstepped its legal authority and misused emergency powers. At the heart of the legal battle was a fundamental question: could IEEPA, a law intended to address extraordinary foreign threats, really be used to justify such broad and far-reaching tariffs against a major trading partner like China? Critics insisted that Congress never meant for IEEPA to serve as a tool for unilateral trade policy, warning that such use undermined the balance of power and set a dangerous precedent for future administrations. Ultimately, the Supreme Court weighed in and agreed with the critics, ruling that the administration's use of the law in this context was an overreach, a misuse of presidential power that went beyond what Congress had intended. The Supreme Court's review raised a core constitutional question. Can the president use emergency powers to impose tariffs, a traditional legislative function? Challengers argued only Congress can levy taxes, and that IEEPA's general language wasn't enough to authorize a sweeping tariff regime. They warned that allowing such power would erase the separation of powers. The government countered that IEEPA was designed for broad presidential action in crises, including tariffs as a regulatory tool. The justices weighed the need for executive agility against the risk of unchecked power. By siding with Congress, the court reinforced legislative authority over economic law. During oral arguments, justices pressed both sides on the limits of presidential power under IEEPA. Several justices questioned whether accepting the government's view would let a president remake the economy under the guise of emergency. Supporters of the tariffs argued that Congress had intentionally given the president broad tools for national security. Opponents warned that upholding the tariffs would set a dangerous precedent, letting future presidents bypass Congress on major policy. The justices also considered the real-world impact, hearing stories of businesses hurt by higher costs and layoffs. The court's focus was not just legal theory, but the disruptive effects on Americans and the economy. Ultimately, the justices prioritized constitutional checks and balances over executive convenience. The court's decision hinged on the major questions doctrine, which requires clear congressional authorization for actions of vast economic significance. The majority found that Congress never intended IEEPA to grant the president power to overhaul the nation's tariff system. Chief Justice Roberts emphasized that taxing and regulating commerce is a core legislative function. Allowing the president to act on vague statutory language would undermine the separation of powers. The dissent argued IEEPA was meant to give the president broad crisis authority, but the majority disagreed. By applying the major questions doctrine, the court reinforced Congress's role in economic policymaking. This precedent will limit future presidents from using emergency powers for sweeping policy changes without explicit congressional consent. The Supreme Court's ruling will ripple across the American economy, especially for companies that rely heavily on imported materials and global supply chains. Many of these businesses will likely see their costs drop, making their products more affordable and boosting their competitiveness both at home and abroad. Sectors such as electronics, automotive, and retail may benefit the most, as they depend on a steady flow of imported parts and goods to keep prices low and shelves stocked. However, American steel and aluminum producers could face renewed foreign competition, which may put pressure on their profits and market share. Small businesses that were hit hard by tariffs may finally have a chance to recover, expand, and even hire more workers as their supply costs decrease. But for some workers in industries that were previously protected by tariffs, there are real concerns about job security and potential layoffs as competition increases. The decision highlights the difficult trade-offs in trade policy, helping some sectors thrive while presenting new challenges for others and forcing a national conversation about economic priorities. Congress now faces mounting pressure to craft a stable, long-term trade strategy that balances these competing interests and provides certainty for businesses and workers alike. Globally, the ruling signals a move away from protectionism, sending a message that the U.S. is open to fair competition and international cooperation. This shift will likely ease trade tensions, encourage new negotiations, and create opportunities for American companies to expand into new markets. American exporters, especially farmers and manufacturers, may regain access to key foreign markets that were previously closed off due to retaliatory tariffs. Ultimately, the decision puts the onus on lawmakers to provide clear, predictable rules for international commerce, ensuring stability and growth for the future. The Supreme Court's decision reshapes U.S. trade policy and presidential authority. Unwinding the tariffs will be complex, with businesses seeking refunds and agencies managing claims. Consumers may eventually see lower prices as supply chains adjust. Future presidents will be more constrained in using emergency powers for major economic actions. The ruling strengthens Congress's hand, requiring the executive branch to seek legislative support for transformative policies. Internationally, the decision could reset trade relationships and rebuild trust with allies. While trade tensions remain, the ruling reaffirms that major policy shifts must be debated in Congress, not decided unilaterally. The path forward for U.S. trade will now be charted through legislation and negotiation, restoring stability and predictability.